When I was a kid, I used to draw. I was never very good at it. My drawings tended to be a little on the flat side, characters with lopsided eyes and wonky proportions. They were my forte, and no one besides my half-blind grandmother and doting mom seemed to think they were worth a damn. Yet, not worth putting on your refrigerator though, huh? I see how that shit is. As such, game art became my focus early on. I had these delusions when I was younger that through my half-assed efforts drawing dragons from a profile view, I would somehow develop into the Jay Lee of video game artists. As you can imagine, this did not pan out. Whenever I played a new game, I found myself marveling at the art of the world that the artist had created. Most of the games I played were still 2D at the time, and when I played Phantasy Star for the first time, I was blown the hell away. Cutscenes rendered in loving detail, first-person dungeons, battle backgrounds that changed depending on what kind of environment you were in, fully animated monster attacks. What? This game blew my tiny little mind. Fast forward a little bit to Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Amn, and a time when games were converting to 3D, and I had that feeling again, but different. The game instilled a sense of wonder in me. The environments were totally generic fantasy, the characters the same, but the writing, the sense of conflict out the gate, and the fact that wandering around a bit, doing some careful searching, you could find hidden wonders behind secret doors, powerful items just sitting around waiting to be claimed by someone brave enough to come and find them. Exploring was dangerous due to enemies that could drain your levels, status effects that actually mattered and affected gameplay. And the fact that you can encounter some of the most powerful enemies in the game lurking in wait behind secret doors and peaceful seeming towns just made the act of exploring rewarding while also adding much needed tension. The act of exploring was fun because there was something to explore, and it didn't always work out in your favor. I wanted to do every mission, find every named weapon and armor piece. Every hideous monster that demolished me in the early game would soon meet their match once I leveled up a bit. The game gave incentives at every turn by giving you a real sense of accomplishment. See, these games, they did very few things, but the things they did do, they did extremely well. Now, the opposite is true today. Games have become much more complicated. Each AAA title tries to blend many types of gameplay to fake a sort of depth. What I will attempt to argue is that these contrivances of design only attempt depth while taking away depth elsewhere. So let's dig in, shall we? Everyone likes lists, right? Like top 5 favorite racist Jar Jar Binks scenes, top 10 ways to give yourself a hernia, top 10 tit jiggle scenes in anime. Yeah, so let's do this in list format. Let's start off with UI. I've been playing a lot of games lately, especially for this list, and the thing I've noticed is that UI design hasn't really evolved at all since we started this whole journey with video games. Lots of foreground elements displaying health, magic, stamina, inventory, ammo, waypoint radar, minimap, notoriety, button prompts, money, high score, experience bars, power level bars, nexus level bars, enemy locations, points of interest, grenade timers, cooldown timers, self-destruct timers, and red jelly smeared on the edges so we know that we're about to die. There's so much shit on the screen that it's impossible to see what's going on in the game world. The issue of UI clutter was pointed out beautifully by Mark Brown with Game Maker's Toolkit, but I'll run the risk of rehashing some of his points here. The Witcher 3 suffered for this. The level design was completely overlooked as I played the game because I was required to stare at a minimap for an inordinate amount of time. There were also many ways to solve this issue of HUD clutter, but I wanted to talk to you about 2 games that handled the various elements spectacularly. First up, let's talk about The Division. Now, I was playing it over the weekend because it was free, and my feeling on Ubisoft Uplay is,
I don't fuck with you. You little stupid ass bitch, I ain't fucking with you. You little dumb ass bitch, I ain't fucking with you. I got a million trillion things I'd rather fucking do than to be fucking with you. Little stupid ass, I don't give a fuck, I don't give a fuck, I don't give a fuck, bitch.
But to my surprise, I actually kind of liked it. I mean, it was repetitive as a game could get, and if I actually bought the game, I probably would have been done with it in a couple hours, but there was one thing that stood out to me the most, and that was the UI design. Not necessarily the various HUD elements like health or ammo, or even the clusterfuck that is the inventory and skill screens, but the waypoint system. That shit was great. See, a lot of games have done this, and every time I see it, I end up asking myself the same thing. Why are open world games not doing this? Basically, the way it works is the same as Witcher 3, except the little line you follow to your objective isn't on a mini-map, but actually drawn in the game world is a 3D line you follow down the various blocks in New York City. What I noticed while playing was that I was aware of more things going on in the game. I was listening to sounds, creeping around corners, taking shortcuts through alleyways, exploring more, and I think the reason I was exploring more was due to the fact that I was seeing more of the level and not missing things while looking at my mini-map. Now, this could be chalked up to the way the city's laid out. Admittedly, it is easier to get around a grid-based city than it is to get around a big open world full of mountains and canyons. But isn't that part of the level designer's job to make the game world easy to navigate while still fun to traverse? What happened to me 9 times out of 10 when I decided to ignore the little dotted line and try to go off and do my own thing in Witcher 3 is that I would get trapped in an area that I would have to backtrack through because of unclimbable cliff faces. This happens so much in games, but none more than Dragon Age Inquisition. Can't tell you how often navigation pissed me off in that game. The Division also does something else pretty good, and that is cover. I mean, okay, cover is easy to do in games. Hell, there's even a cover system mod for Fallout 4 that kind of turns the game into a joke. But what Division did well is the switching of cover and showing you visually. Little white lines are drawn from you to the next piece of cover depending on the direction you are looking and pushing. And what is so great about this is it shows you the path you'll take to get to that cover, which helps you determine if you'll be getting shot on your way up there. Next up to bat is a real heavy hitter in terms of UI design, a game that decided getting rid of a HUD would be the best way to immerse the player, and I think they got way more right than their first outing than they get credit for. The game is Dead Space. Now, Dead Space excelled at being a hybrid of action and survival horror and slumped in others, but what I noticed the most about the game was how it handled health, ammo, stasis, and navigation elements. Having these elements displayed in a place you would normally be looking, the back of your character, while keeping the game world clear of unnecessary HUD elements did something that I haven't seen done since the original Resident Evil, and that is immerse me in the experience and genuinely gave me a creeped out feeling to the point where when I had to go to the bathroom, I had a moment of hesitation. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of dark out there in that hallway. Of course, after the 15,000th jump scare, the gimmick wears thin, but the HUD is rock solid, and they deserve credit for doing it right. And I really wish I knew why more games do not try to do similar things. It's such an elegant system. Think about what having HUD elements on the corner of your screen does to your attention. It's taking away focus from what is important, so that you could check to see if you're about to die, or double check ammo. Those seconds where you look to the edges is taking you out of the game world and bringing you into the UI layer, reminding you that this is just a game. It's also, I believe, the reason why we get that red jelly effect and have regenerating health bars. It's very easy to know you're about to die when the screen goes blurry and desaturated, but you know what else isn't easy? Getting to cover when your fucking screen is covered in raspberry jam! Displaying the HUD elements on the back of your character brings them into focus in a place where you are already going to be spending a lot of your time looking. And giving the health bar different colors for health levels, green for healthy, yellow for injured, red for almost dead, is a quick way to remind the player to heal without taking their eyes off of what's going on in front of them, which is massively important when you are in the middle of a tough fight. There are other visual and mechanical clues as well, like the run state for Isaac changing when he's injured. It all helps you to stay focused while still knowing the status of your health without taking your eyes away from the crazy creatures trying to kill you. By adding more shit on the screen, you have taken away the experience of playing the game. Side quests are an interesting topic because they're usually something a dev throws into a game as a sort of Easter egg. At least, that's what it used to be. Now side quests are an absolute must in every game that has and ever will exist, and I'm not here to call for its immediate and summary execution. But I am here to talk about its horrible war crimes and gross violations of human rights. In particular, I want to talk about how side quests waste your goddamn time. Most side quests in modern games are simple affairs to get you some extra EXP or some bullshit item that you'll out-level in an hour or two, and as such, they consist of dumb, mindless tasks that consist of this structure. Go to Santa Monica and Vine and get some edibles from the shop with the green cross in the window. Bring them back to me so I can chill out on the couch and watch Family Guy. You get your reward and walk around and find another quest, which probably consists of go downstairs and beat up my neighbors for listening to their music at full fucking volume at midnight. Also tell them that their music sucks and I hate them. You go and kill a bunch of 20-something assholes, get your reward, and that's that. Okay, so that kind of quest design is complete bullshit, and I shouldn't even really need to explain, but I will. See, after about 5 of these kinds of quests, I lose interest in doing any more side content, which means in a game like Dragon Age Inquisition, which could quite literally be renamed to Fetch Quest Simulator, and no one would care, not even BioWare, you are doing nothing but fetch quests to level up your character so you could do the fun content, which is the story missions. In reality, this game without any of that filler crap is about 40 hours long. A side quest in a video game used to be a distraction, something that gave you a chance to take a small break from the main quest and was there to break up the monotony of the main storyline. Now the main storyline is the thing that you do to get a break from the monotony of the side quests. I think that the Elder Scrolls popularized this sort of content, and think about it. It is a rather easy way to produce. It requires very little in the way of talent or time to produce a ridiculous amount of fetch quests and kill quests. The person giving you the quest need only have the most paper-thin motivations, and you really don't need to know any of the backstory, which is a good thing because no one's offering you any details. The content is simply there to give your character progression and something to do. It simply seems to exist because there's a level cap for fighting the main baddie. It's also there because game studios cannibalize each other's ideas. When this lame-ass form of design came into prominence and was shown to work in World of Warcraft, game devs lost their goddamn minds. It took them a while to take notice, but when a juggernaut of a game like WoW comes along and shoves a year's worth of content into a game that requires so very little in terms of programming or thought, and people eat it up, the single-player market was busy thinking of ways that they could take advantage of it, which I believe is the main reason we saw games like Dragon Age Inconsequential and Mass Effect Androgynous. The main problem this content presents is the sheer amount of it. Mainly when you're writing a story that is to be followed from beginning to end, the last thing you want is for people to take off in the middle of the story and spend 20 hours or more feeding people's cats and lancing moles off of old ladies' backs, or finding 20 orc grundle sacks to craft a better mount for their horse. How is anyone supposed to come back to the main storyline and remember where they left off? With such a large gap between story missions in a game like Dragon Age Inquisition, I often found myself lost in the glut of content, asking myself why I was there, what I was doing, what was I supposed to do next and why. The details became muddy from the separation. For my money, there's a game that did this side content right, and that game is of course The Witcher 3. A game I just got done criticizing, so much for consistency, I guess. So let's talk examples. In The Witcher 3, I've taken a contract to kill a beast that is killing folk outside of town. Now, at this point in the game, I have taken plenty of these kinds of quests, and they have, up until this point, unfolded in similar ways, but never the exact same way. So every time I do one of these hunt quests, I feel like I never know what to expect. I go to the get-in place and talk to the guard waiting outside. The first thing he tells me is that there's someone else out there to get the beast and that I'd better hurry. The first phase of this quest is to go and investigate the place where the latest victim was killed. The body, I am told, is still there because no one's come to collect it yet. The second phase of this quest is investigatory. We go to the barn, see some tracks leading in, make some determinations based on their shape, and walk in to find the body inside drained of blood. Our initial suspicion is that the monster is a vampire. We follow the tracks to a dock, but the tracks end there and we're forced to go around to the other side of the lake to investigate further. We find some rats and tracks leading into a house. Inside the house, we find an Ekimara and another Witcher, who might be familiar to you if you've ever played the first game. His name is Lambert. Once the Ekimara is dead, you are taken to get your reward. The third phase of this quest is when you find out that Lambert was only trying to get close to the person being guarded inside and proceeds to pick a fight with the quest giver, asking where a specific man is. The quest giver calls the guards and you're forced to fight them off. In a small house, we find that Lambert has the quest giver backed into a corner. Once he finds out where someone named Vivienne is hiding, Lambert kills the quest giver. Geralt is shocked by this and demands an answer for why, but in order for us to know why, we must begin the fourth phase of the quest. Are you starting to get the picture here? I mean, even though this quest is optional and you could skip it at any time that you want, why the hell would you? It's fascinating. We know Lambert, he's a fellow Witcher. What's got him going nuts and killing defenseless people? What is so important that he picks a fight with Redoran guards? That is a side quest. A living, breathing narrative that is not separate from the main storyline, but instead either enhances it or the world wrapped around it. What this game just did is give you a multi-layer quest and end the quest by giving you another quest that is directly related to the first one. Each quest in this game is like that, with the exception of the mindless mission board crap or clearing out camps. This style works because each quest is its own storyline that both begins, has a middle, and eventually at the end of the quest line resolves nicely with a bow that you create either out of a shitty situation or another shitty situation. It's structured in a way that makes sense narratively. First significant event, find out what killed the guy. Conflict, kill the Ekimara. Complication, Lambert kills the quest giver. Geralt must find out who Vivienne is and what this person has to do with Lambert. To find out how the story ends, we must do the rest of the quest in the line. And they have effectively hooked us with the premise of Lambert killing the very man who hired him and promising answers if we meet him later. Bait the hook, catch the fish. Meanwhile, in the other games, we're treated to such gems as, a bandit stole my sword, can you go into a dungeon and get it for me? Find where a dragon is fed so a guy can understand it more. Find a skull and do some connect the dots shit. Do some alien Sudoku puzzles. Go to this camp and kill everyone. None of these quests mean anything. They do not expand the world. They don't even tell a story. They are there so that you can level up. They are there so you don't get bored. In other words, they're just there. They exist to exist. As a person who thinks of himself as an amateur level designer, one thing I see far too much of in level design, especially in RPGs, is the FPS-like design of dungeons. What do I mean by this? In an FPS, the primary concern is with exploration and combat. You go into a level, run around and kill some shit until you get to the end. There are some notable exceptions, however, like Doom with all of its secret rooms and hidden items, but for the most part, the focus is on shooting. This same design philosophy seems to have bled over into RPGs with the help of studios like Bethesda. In fact, they made a whole game out of this design philosophy. It was called Fallout 4, and it dug up my dead grandmother and made me watch as it cut off pieces of her to cook and eat. Fallout 4 is a perfect example of what is wrong with RPGs and the design of their dungeon. Now, for clarity, I define dungeon as an indoor area with tunnels or a series of rooms with challenges for the player to overcome, which has a goal at the end. Fallout 4's dungeon design is simplistic. You go into a place, you explore a bit, pick up items, but the main reason you're there is to kill everything inside, find the items or enemy that you need to find, and run back to the quest giver. The way these levels are laid out is also simplistic. You enter the room and typically there will be only two paths. Only one path will typically lead you in the direction you need to go, but the other will most likely be a dead end that might have an item in it, but more than likely not. Choosing what path you go down isn't really a choice because there are no consequences for going down the wrong path. For instance, if you go down the wrong path in a Fallout 4 dungeon, you will run into a wall almost immediately, or the path will loop back around to the area that you would have ended up if you had taken the other path. It's the horseshoe level design that Bethesda has been designing for their last couple of games, and it is a limiting design philosophy. First off, all your levels end up being a bent line. The fun is not in exploring these places so much as going room to room, killing and looting. The game's dungeons do not inspire you to stop and take them in, looking up and down to find a path forward. They simply exist to get you from one end of the map to another. Rarely are these levels vertical, rarely do they loop in on themselves or take advantage of shortcuts to backtrack to a newly opened door. And let's not get started on what Fallout 4 thinks a puzzle is. So why? I mean, why are we in a dungeon? Well, in Fallout 4, it's more than likely that we stumbled across it or many others along our way to our destination, and decided to poke around inside to stave off some boredom. So now, we see the first in a series of problems that plagues this sort of games design. The open-ended nature means that the design of the dungeons are divorced from their meaning. We are in this dungeon to kill things and find better weapons and ammo. I find myself most of the time ignoring terminals and the various story items inside, because when the dungeon is taken outside of the context of its quest, the text on the terminals and diaries make little sense. They're just distractions to me. But also, trying to tell a story in these dungeons is a little jarring, because if you stumbled into this thing and the story in the dungeon doesn't start at the beginning, but instead somewhere in the middle, you run the risk of confusing the player. This is a good excuse for the laziness of design we see in Bethesda dungeons. I believe the biggest issue is their linearity. See, after Morrowind, the biggest complaint I heard about the dungeons was that you had to backtrack all the way back to the beginning of the level in order to leave the dungeon. And it was a legitimate complaint, because once you ran through the thing once, going back through was boring because everything inside was already dead. So instead of addressing the linearity of the dungeon's design and maybe creating some interesting exit events for some of them, like having to leave the dungeon through alternate routes because a route is now closed, or invasions at the end of the mission where you have to fight your way back out, or any numerous amounts of creative ways to keep the player engaged on their way out of the dungeon, they went the lazy route and adopted horseshoe level design. If all you're gonna do is loop me back to the beginning of the level, why not just give me a warping spell or an item that warps me back to the beginning of the level? I mean, why bother designing the levels this way if that's your answer? Because to pull this sort of design off, you're forced to get rid of levitation, and goddammit, I liked levitation. So what am I saying here? It's that the linearity and easy fixes forces poor design and limits creativity. Let's talk about a design for dungeon that I am personally fond of, and that's the Serpentine level. Think of a level in Castlevania Symphony of the Night and blend it with Dark Souls Firelink Shrine, and you probably start getting the picture of what I'm trying to say. You start off with the beginning area. This is the place that is supposed to introduce you to the dungeon. We should be getting a lot of information about this place from here, like for instance, what kind of place is this? Did a fight happen here recently? What should I expect further in? Next is a part of the level that I like to call the base camp. In Dark Souls, this is Firelink Shrine. It's the place that you'll come back to time and time again as the level loops around and back into it. From this area, the dungeon splits off into different paths, which eventually leads you back to base camp in order to go somewhere from here you were not able to go before. The sense of progression is different in this level because when you design a straight line, there are no real markers to show the player they have progressed other than the trail of bodies they leave behind. You might be able to fake progression, or fake a sense of progression by changing the music or the environment as you get further in, but in a serpentine design, the multiple paths with locked doors or an undefeatable enemy showing us something that we can't quite do yet is more of a signpost. It instills a sense of wonder every time we see a door and it says we don't possess the ability to open it yet. It is an obstacle to our progress, and our natural curiosity drives us to figure out what is behind that locked door, or that booby-trapped chest, or that passageway blocked by the statue. When that obstacle is defeated through either our own cleverness or through the scripting of the level, revisiting these areas to see what is locked behind that door is a lot like opening a chest in the Zelda dungeon. Hearing that music, seeing that light, and dun 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 dun, something new. Not to mention you can still dump players back to the beginning of the level when the dungeon is exhausted, but the point is, the journey there made the player think. He wasn't simply hunting through a level for the next checkpoint. They were exploring to figure out how to open that door. They had a purpose for being there. Humans are interesting creatures. When things are common and easy to get, we lose interest, but rarity fascinates us. We put a value on rare rocks, one-of-a-kind paintings, and limited edition comics. Baseball cards, you name it, we've put a value on it, and if there isn't a whole lot of them, it's going to cost a lot. That's just the way our desires work. You need only look at CSGO skins to see this goofy human bullshit in action. So why then in so many games do you clutter up my screen and inventory with so much useless crap that I don't care about? Every game from The Witcher 3 to Skyrim and Diablo do this shit, and it's a waste of resources. Every item you get, for the most part, is useless unless it gives you some minor stat boost because they all behave the same. Armor reduces incoming damage, weapons deal increased damage. Getting a boost to either one is a no-brainer, so the only time we pick up an item is if it's better than the one we got, or we could sell it for a lot of money. Meanwhile, this item that somebody worked on for a day or so in a fluorescent lit cubicle somewhere is just sitting in our bag because it isn't as good as what we have in our hand at the moment. Pen and Paper Dungeons & Dragons had a similar problem, but it was solved by the weight systems and various issues of money that good dungeon masters managed. Money was hard to come by, and no one wanted to be encumbered when they got into a fight, so people rarely picked up junk items unless they were worth something. In most games you have weapon tiers, which seems like an artificial way, for instance, to give value to items that are in categories like common, uncommon, rare, legendary, etc. The result is you end up spending a lot of time looking at items you will never use, navigating around them in menus not to pick them up, or picking them up to salvage them and sell off as trash to clutter up in the merchant's inventory. I think that Dark Souls and the Souls series in general did items right. See, weapons, at least good ones, were difficult to come by. Sure, I could pick up a broken short sword off of a dead body, and hey, I might even get lucky and find an intact short sword, but I don't want to go the whole game with that thing, so whenever I found a new item, I went through my inventory and looked at it. I even equipped it and swung it around a bit. Why? Because every weapon in Dark Souls was unique in some way. From the hand axe to the washing pole, each weapon had a moveset, swing angle, length, speed, and other variables that are not contained in the stat sheet. Each weapon needed to be tested out, swung around a bit to see what it did. In this way, there truly were very few junk items in Dark Souls because every new item you found was potentially what you needed to defeat that boss that had been holding up your progress. When you look at Skyrim, the only thing that makes you look at an item is to see what special stat effect it might have, but literally every weapon in the game acts the same across all weapon types in its class. All melee weapons swing in an arc, all ranged weapons travel out in an arc. You'll never find anything in Skyrim like the kukri or the dancing blades in Dark Souls 3 with their spin moves, or the Farron greatsword sending you flying into a slamming front flip, because weapons are not treated with personality, they're treated as a type. When I get an item, I want the game to make me think about how I could use that item. I want that item to open up new possibilities to me, to open up a new way of playing that I didn't know was possible before. The other part of this is that the only reason we wear junk items is because the game is literally hiding the stuff that's good behind an artificial algorithm or inflated gold value. The rush we feel when we get these items is dulled by the fact that we actually didn't do anything really profound to get the thing that we wanted. We just ground away at a mob or saved up our cash. Going into a dungeon and clearing out a bunch of mobs so that I could find my third plasma rifle is not what I would call rewarding. For the opposite of this, think about The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past when you finally get the Master Sword. All the work that you had to do to get there, the dungeons you needed to traverse, the bosses you needed to defeat to get all the pendants, it all culminated in the end with you pulling that sword out of the pedestal. Up to this point, we had only heard about this legendary sword. We had heard of its power to destroy the ultimate evil, but we haven't been able to wield it yet. We walk up to the sword of power, grasp it, our amulets fly off, glow, and we pull the sword from its home. Then imagine, we kill an enemy while we're leaving and it drops a legendary two-handed ray gun of power. Point is, rarity is nice, but we don't get a sense of accomplishment from randomized systems, nor do we get a raging clue when we find a legendary item we know we'll be replacing halfway through the game. So you're climbing through the entry to a dungeon and your teammate says to you, "Oh, it's dark inside, better get out a torch." So you go into your inventory and grab the torch, and as you're walking along you see a path going off to your right, and your mate says to you, "Hey, I think there's something down this hallway, maybe we should look." And you think to yourself, "Yeah dude, I was just about to do that before you said it." You walk a little further in and the guy with the big mouth who won't shut up about how cold it is in here, or how when he sees the guy who killed his mom, he's gonna give that guy's nipples such a pinch, he sees yet another thing and won't shut up about it. Wow, was this cave dug by hand? It's incredible. Is it incredible, dude? I mean, really, is it? I mean, we've seen about 50 of these goddamn caves since I started this game, and each time you've said something about it. It's too cold, it's too wet, do you think there's monsters in there? What's this sound? Are we gonna get lost? Is this cave gonna collapse? Do people like me? No, no one likes you because you won't shut up. You won't just let me play the game and enjoy it, see, because you feel the need to talk about every stupid thing that comes into your head instead of doing what normal people do, which was repress those thoughts, lock them away somewhere deep down inside yourself, so that in 20 years, all those pent-up thoughts will trigger a memory of your Uncle Frank who made you sit on a lump on his lap when you were a kid, and you jump up into a pit because you just can't live with the pain anymore, and, well, quite frankly, Jim, that day can't come soon enough, because there is literally nothing that I can't stand less than NPCs and companions who follow me around and won't shut the fuck up. First off, I'm trying to play a game here. I am trying to enjoy the music, take in the sights, see things with my own eyeballs, and every time I try to get into whatever it is I'm doing, you are going on and on about what you think, chasing away any thoughts that I might have about what I am doing or what I'm seeing. So there's this wonderful little thing called show don't tell. It's often used in writing. See, instead of you telling me that this cave I'm in was dug by dwarves 100 years ago, why not show me tiny skeletons with shovels gripped in their bony hands, scratchings on the wall where pickaxes carved out their surface, support beams, sticks of dynamite, tracks with mine carts full of dirt covered in cobwebs. Show me the history, you bastard. Don't tell me about it, because all I see is an empty cave with torches. And this thing that you're going on about sounds way more interesting than what I'm actually seeing. This trend started with Baldur's Gate 2. To be honest, it probably started before that, but I remember reading Shadows of Am and reviewers gushed over how great it was that the companions would interrupt you and talk to you about the mission or just go on about their thoughts while at camp. And that's great. I mean, Baldur's Gate 2 did it really well. The game never ruined any surprises by blowing its wad all over itself by having a companion stop and say, "Oh hey, look over there. Oh, I wonder what's in that room," and so on. It was in context of the story and character motivations. It even had a romance option that actually made sense. Now that is party banter, not the crap you see in Dragon Age Inconsequential, because sure, it's not bad when they are being chummy with each other or when they tell the occasional one-liner, but it's at its absolute worst when the banner substitutes for good design by telling you things that aren't present in the game world. It's the voiceover equivalent of a codex entry. If it isn't in the game, sweetie, don't tell me about it, okay? Hey everybody, this is Paul. I just wanted to say thank you for if you actually got through this entire massive fucking video. This was a huge undertaking. I actually learned After Effects to do all the graphics. I know they're not great, but you know, it was the best that I could do. You know, sorry it took so long to get one of these out, but it really did take a lot of time and effort. But I just want to thank you guys for subscribing. Welcome all the new subscribers, and just say if you like this video, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. And if you're so inclined, I set up a Patreon. It's not mandatory, but it's there if you feel like supporting the channel. There will be a link below, and maybe there'll be a title card at the end of this video. And anyway, if you guys have any ideas for new content that you would like to see, any games that you would like me to talk about, just post a comment below. And as always, this has been a rant from Strat-Edgy, and now that you've heard it, go play some video games.